In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you've had. The abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it appears in a normal person. And so it came about that in college I was unjustly accused of being a politician, because I was privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men. Reserving judgments is a manner of infinite hope. I'm still a little afraid of missing something if I forget that, as my father snobbishly suggested, and I snobbishly repeat, a sense of the fundamental decencies is parceled out unequally at birth. And after boasting this way of my tolerance, I came to the admission that it has a limit.
When I came back from the East last summer, I wanted no more riotous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. Only Gatsby, the man who gives his name to this book, was exempt from my retraction. Gatsby, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him. It was an extraordinary gift for hope, romantic readiness, such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. No. Gatsby turned out all right in the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short, winded relations of men. I graduated from Princeton, and instead of returning to the Midwest, which had become the ragged edge of the universe for me, I stayed east to try my hand at the finance world. The practical thing was to find rooms in the city, but it was a warm season, and I just left the country of wide lands and friendly trees, so I found the house, a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow. With that, I had that familiar conviction that life was just beginning over again with the summer. It was a matter of chance that I should have rented a house in one of the strangest communities in North America. It was on that slender, riotous island which extends itself due east of New York, and where there are, among other natural curiosities, two unusual formations of land, two enormous eggs. I lived at West Egg, the, well, less fashionable of the two, though this is a most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. My house was at the very tip of the egg, squeezed between two huge places. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was Gatsby's mansion. Across the bay, the white palaces of fashionable East Egg glittered along the water. I began my summer on the evening I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. Daisy was my second cousin, once removed, and I'd known Tom in college. Her husband,
among various physical accomplishments, had become one of the most powerful ends to ever play football at Princeton. A national figure. One of those men that reached such an acute and limited excellence at age 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax. His family was enormously wealthy. They spent a year in France for no particular reason, then drifted here and there restlessly wherever rich people play polo and are rich together.
This was a permanent move,
said Daisy, but I didn't believe it. I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever. And so it happened that on that warm, windy evening, I drove over to East Egg to see two old friends who I scarcely knew at all.
Got a nice place here.
He said, his eyes flashing about restlessly. We walked through a high hallway into a bright, rosy-colored space. A breeze blew through the room, curtain at one end and out the corner like pale flags, twisting them up towards the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, and then rippled over the wine-colored rug. The only completely stationary were two young women who were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon.
The younger of the two was a stranger.
The other girl, Daisy, made an attempt to rise. She leaned slightly forward with a conscientious expression. She held my hand for a moment, looking up into my face, promising that there was no one in the world she so much wanted to see.
That was the way she had.
I'm paralyzed with happiness.
It's the kind of voice that the ear follows up and down, as if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again.
They miss me in Chicago.
The whole town is desolate. There's a persistent wail all night long along the North Shore.
How gorgeous. You ought to see the baby.
I'd like to.
What are you doing, Nick?
Tom, who had been hovering restless about the room, rested his hand on my shoulder. I'm in finance.
Who with?
I told him.
Never heard of him.
You will if you stay in the East.
Oh, I'll stay in the East. Don't you worry about that.
Absolutely. I'm stiff. I've been laying on this couch for as long as I can remember. You live in West Egg, don't you? I know someone there.
Oh, I don't know a single.
Oh, you must know Gatsby.
Gatsby? What Gatsby?
Before I could reply that he was my neighbor, it was announced dinner was served.
In 2 weeks, it'll be the longest day of the year. Do you always watch for longest day of the year and then miss it? I always watch for longest day of the year and then miss it.
We ought to plan something.
All right, what will we plan?
Before I could answer, her eyes fastened with odd expression on her little finger.
Look, I heard it.
We all looked. The knuckle was black and blue.
You did it, Tom. That's what I get for marrying a brute of a man. A great, big, hulking, physical specimen
I
of a...
hate that word, hulking.
Hulking. Tom's getting very profoundly lately. He reads deep books with long words in them. Do you want to hear about the butler's nose?
That's why I came over tonight.
He hasn't always been a butler. He used to be a silver polisher for some people in New York. They had a silver service for about 200 people. He would polish from morning till night until finally it began to affect his nose.
Things went from bad to worse.
For a moment, the last sunshine fell with romantic affection upon her glowing face. Her voice compelled me forward breathlessly as I listened. Then the glow faded, each light discerning her with lingering regrets, like children leaving a pleasant street at dusk.
I love to see you on my table, Nick. You remind me of a rose. Doesn't he? An absolute rose. Excuse me.
I was about to speak when Jordan sat up alertly and said,
Don't talk. I want to hear what happens.
"Something's happening?"
You mean you don't know? Tom's got some woman in New York. She might have the decency not to telephone at dinner time, don't you think?
Almost before I had grasped her meaning, Tom and Daisy were back at the table. Daisy sat down, glanced searchingly at Miss Baker, then at me. I couldn't guess what Daisy and Tom were thinking, but I doubt if Miss Baker, who seems to have mustered a certain hearty skepticism, was able to utterly put the fifth guest's shrill metallic urgency out of mind. After dinner, Tom and Miss Baker, with several feet of twilight between them, strolled back by the library. I followed Daisy. I asked what I thought would be some sedative questions about her little girl. I suppose she talks. And, eats and everything.
Oh, yes. Let me tell you about the day she was born. It'll show you how I've gotten to feel about things. Well, she was less than an hour old, and Tom was God knows where. I woke up out of the ethers with an utterly abandoned feeling. I asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or a girl. She said it was a girl, and I turned my head away and I wept. I said, I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world. A beautiful little fool. You see, I think everything's terrible anyhow. And I know I've been everywhere, seen everything, and done everything. God, I'm so sophisticated.
I waited, and sure enough, in a moment, she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face, as if she had asserted her membership in a rather distinguished secret society to which she and Tom belonged.
To be continued. Time for this good girl to go to bed.
I was confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. As I returned home, the silhouette of a moving car vanishing in the moonlight. I turned my head towards the dock and saw that I was not alone. He was standing with his hands in his pockets regarding the stars. Something in his leisurely movements and the secure position of his feet upon the dock suggested that it was Mr. Gatsby himself, come out to determine what share was his of our local heavens. About halfway between West Egg and New York, the motor road hastily joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile so as to shrink away from a certain desolate area of land. This is the Valley of Ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke. But above the gray land and the spasms of bleak dust which drifts endlessly over it, you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which pass over a non-existent nose. The Valley of Ashes is bounded on one side by a small, foul river, and when the drawbridge is up to let barges through, the passengers on waiting trains can stare at the dismal scene for a half an hour. Because of this, I met Tom's mistress. Now, the fact that he had one was insisted upon wherever he was known. Though I was curious to see her, I had no desire to meet her. But I did. I went with Tom up to New York on the train one afternoon.
We're getting off. I want you to meet my girl.
The only building in sight was a small block of yellow brick sitting on the edge of the wasteland, a sort of compact main street. One of the 3 shops was a garage that read George B. Wilson, Repairs. He was a spiritless man, anemic and faintly handsome. When he saw us, a damp gleam of hope sprang from his eyes.
Hello, Wilson, old man. How's business?
I can't complain. When are you gonna sell me that car of yours?
Next week. I've got my man working on it right now.
Works pretty slow, don't he?
No, he doesn't. If you feel that way about it, then maybe I'd best sell that car somewhere else after all.
I didn't mean that. I just meant...
She carried her flesh sensuously, smoldering. She smiled slowly and walked through her husband as if he were a ghost and shook hands with Tom, looking him flush in the eyes.
Get some chairs so somebody can sit down.
Of course.
I want to see. Get on the next train.
All right.
I'll meet you on the newsstand, on the lower level.
She nodded and moved away from him, just as George Wilson emerged with 2 chairs. We abruptly left, leaving George in his oblivious gloom. We waited for her down the road and out of sight.
Terrible place, isn't it?
Awful.
Does her good to get away.
Doesn't her husband object?
Wilson? He thinks she goes up to see her sister Catherine in New York. The man's so dumb he doesn't even know she's alive.
So Tom Buchanan and his girl and I went up together to New York. Not quite together, for Mrs. Wilson sat discreetly in another car. Tom deflected that much to the sensibilities of those East Eggers who might be on the train. We arrived on Fifth Avenue, warm and soft, almost pastoral on the summer Sunday afternoon. Hold on. I have to leave you here.
Nonsense. Myrtle will be hurt if you don't join us, wouldn't you, Myrtle?
Come on, I'll telephone my sister Catherine. She's said to be very beautiful by people who ought to know.
The apartment was on the top floor. The apartment was well furnished and small. I've been drunk just once in my life, and the second time was this afternoon. So everything that happened has a dime hazy cast over it. Although, until after 8 o'clock, the apartment was full of cheerful sun. Sitting on Tom's lap, Mrs. Wilson called up several people on the phone. Then there was no cigarettes, and I went to buy some from the store on the corner. I was alone when Catherine arrived. I don't remember when. Tom and Myrtle emerged from the bedroom, slightly disheveled.
Get some more ice, Myrtle, before everyone falls asleep.
I told the boy in the lobby about the ice. These people, you have to keep after them all the time.
She said, then looked at me and laughed pointedly. The sister Catherine sat down next to me.
Do you live on Long Island too?
I live at West End.
Really? I was down there at a party about a month ago at a man named Gatsby's. Do you know him?
I live next door to him.
Well, they say he's a cousin of the Duke of Windsor, and that's where all his money comes from.
Really?
I'm scared of him. I heard he's a killer. He killed a man once, you know.
This absorbing information about my neighbor was interrupted by an outburst from Myrtle and Tom. Catherine leaned close to me and whispered in my ear.
Neither of them can stand the person they're married to.
Can't they?
Can't stand them. What I say is, why go on living with them if they can't stand them? If I was them, I'd get a divorce and get married to each other right away.
Doesn't she like Wilson either? I asked. The answer to this was unexpected. It came from Myrtle.
See? You see? It's really his wife that's keeping them apart. She's a Catholic and they don't believe in divorce. Why did you, Myrtle? Nobody forced you to.
I married him because I thought he was a gentleman. I thought he knew something about breeding. But he was a bit to lick my shoe.
You were crazy about him for a while.
Crazy about him? Who said I was crazy about him? I was never any more crazy about him than I was about the man there.
She pointed suddenly at me. I tried to show by my expression that I expected no affection.
The only crazy I was when I married him. I knew right away I made a mistake. He borrowed somebody's best suit to get married in, and never even told me about it. The man came after one day while he was out. Oh, is this your suit? I said. This is the first I ever heard about it. But I gave it to him, and then I laid down and cried.
She really ought to get away from him. They've been living over that garage for 11 years, and Tom's the first sweetie she ever had.
I wanted to get out and walk eastward towards the park through the soft twilight. But each time I tried to go, I became entangled in some wild, strident argument which pulled me back as if the ropes into my chair. Yet high over the city, our line of yellow windows must have contributed to their share of human secrecy to the casual watcher in the darkening streets. And I saw him too, looking up and wondering. I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. There was music from my neighbor's house through the summer nights. In his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. Every Friday, 5 crates of oranges and lemons arrived from the city, and every Monday, those same oranges and lemons left his back door in a pyramid of pulpless halves. At least once a fortnight, a corps of caterers came down with several hundred feet of canvas and enough colored lights to make a Christmas tree of Gatsby's enormous garden. An enormous bar was set up with real brass. By 7 p.m., the band had arrived, and it was no thin five-piece affair, but true rock stars with blown-out hair and English accents, whole with synthesizers and high and low drums. The name of the band was a name you said twice. Laughter is easier minute by minute, spilled with prodigality, tipped out at a wonderful, cheerful word. The party had begun. I believe that on the first night I went to Gatsby's house, I was one of the few guests who had actually been invited. People were not invited, they went there. They got the cars and bore them out to Long Island, and somehow they ended up at Gatsby's. Once they were there, they conducted themselves according to the rules of behavior associated with, well, an amusement park. But I had been invited. I was told that the honor would be entirely Gatsby's to attend his little party that night. I was on my way to getting roaring drunk from sheer embarrassment when Jordan Baker came into view. Hello, I wrote to her.
I thought you'd be here. I remember you live next door.
Our meeting was interrupted by two party attendees, already 5 keys to the winds.
Hi. You don't know us, but we met here like a month ago.
Yes, I like to come. I never care what I do, but I always have fun. When I was here last, I tore my outfit on a chair. They asked for a name and address. Within a week, a package came from a brand new designer, Tommy Hilfiger, one of a kind and just off the runway.
There's something funny about a guy who do a thing like that. He doesn't want trouble with anybody.
Who doesn't?
Gatsby! Somebody told me. Somebody told me he thought he killed a man once.
I don't think it's so much that. It's more he was a KGB informant.
I heard from a man who knew all about him. Grew up with him in Russia. You look at him sometimes thinking nobody's looking. I bet he killed a man.
Let's get out. This is much too polite for me.
We got out, and she explained we were going to find the host for the party attendees. I've never met him, she said, and it was making me uneasy. By midnight, the hilarity increased. Jordan and I found a place to watch the fashionable ruckus continue just on the edge of it all. I was enjoying myself now. I had taken 2 bigger bowls of champagne, and the scene had changed before my eyes into something significant, elemental, profound. At the lull of the entertainment, a man looked at me and said,
Your face is familiar. Are you in the art scene? Call Andy's work the Great Series?
barely, but I know what you're talking about. And I've seen it. I was there when it opened.
Warhol is an acquaintance of mine. I was there too. I knew I'd seen you before.
We talked for a moment about some places of note during that time. 54, Solid Gold, and the like. He mentioned he just bought a speedboat. He's going to try it out in the morning.
Want to go with me, old sport? It's just near the shore along the town.
What time?
What time suits you?
Having a good time now?
Said Jordan, eyeing the man I was chatting with. Much better. This is an unusual party for me. They say people just show up, but I was invited, see? I haven't even seen the host. I was just over there.
Oh, I thought you knew, old sport. I'm afraid I'm not a very good host. You see, I'm Gatsby.
He smiled, understanding me. Much more than understanding me. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole eternal world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as you wanted to be understood, believed in, just as you would like to believe in yourself. Oh, I beg your pardon.
It's all right, old sport, an honest mistake.
Almost at the moment when Mr. Gatsby identified himself, a butler informed him a call from Chicago was requiring his assistance. He excused himself with a small bow.
If you want anything, just ask for it. I will rejoin you later.
Once he was gone, I turned to Jordan, constrained to assure of my surprise. Who is he really? Do you know?
He's just a man named Gatsby. He once told me he was an Oxford man, but I don't believe it.
Why not?
I don't know, I just don't think he went there. Anyhow, he gives large parties, and I like large parties. They're so intimate. At large parties, there's never any privacy.
Excuse me, Miss Baker, I beg your pardon, but Mr. Gatsby would like to speak with you alone.
With me?
Yes, madam.
She got up slowly, raising her eyebrows at me in astonishment, and followed the butler to the house. I was alone, and it was almost 2. I looked around. Most of the remaining women were now in fights with men said to be their husbands. One guy attempted to talk to a young actress, and after attempting to laugh at the situation, he broke down into tears. The party was deteriorating quickly. As I made my way to the hall to leave, I caught the eye of Jordan Baker and Gatsby as they came out of the library. He was saying some last words to her as they left. Jordan rushed over to me.
I just heard the most amazing thing.
What is it?
Oh, it was simply amazing. But I swore I wouldn't tell him. Here I am tantalizing you. Please come and see me. Phone book. I'm in the phone book. Under the name Miss Sigourney Howard. My aunt. I'm staying with her right now.
She was hurrying off as she spoke. Rather ashamed that my first appearance had stayed so late, I turned towards the masses as they were leaving to find Gatsby. I wanted to apologize for not having known him.
Don't mention it. Don't give it another thought, old sport. Don't forget, we're going up to the boat tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.
Philadelphia wants you on the phone, sir.
All right, in a minute. I'm on my way. Good night.
Good night. Reading over what I've written so far, I see I have given the impression that the events of 3 nights, several weeks apart, were all that absorbed me. On the contrary, they were merely casual events in a crowded summer, and until much later, absorbed me infinitely less than my personal affairs. Most of the time, I worked. I took dinner at the Yale Club, or ate McDonald's alone in my house or at my desk. For some reason, meals were the gloomiest part of my day. However, the fascination of the events around my cousin, Jordan, and my neighbor crept into my life and consumed most of my waking mind. I went out on the speedboat the next morning and attended 3 more of Gatsby's parties, but I still felt lost and longing. At 9 a.m. one morning in July, Gatsby's gorgeous car lurched up the rocky drive to my door and gave an outburst of melody. It was the first time he had called upon me.
Good morning, old sport. You're having lunch with me today. Pretty, isn't it, old sport? Haven't you seen it before?
I'd seen it. Everybody had seen it. With its yellow exterior, how could anyone miss it? We started into town. It was a disconcerting ride. We hadn't reached West Egg Village before Gatsby began leaving his elegant sentences unfinished.
Look here, old sport. What's your opinion of me, anyhow?
I just looked overwhelmed.
Well, I'm going to tell you something about my life. I don't want you to get the wrong idea about me from all these stories you'll hear. I'll tell you God's truth. I'm the son of some very wealthy people from the Midwest, all dead now. I was brought up in America, but educated at Oxford because all my ancestors have been. It's a family tradition.
He looked at me sideways. No wonder Jordan Baker had believed he was lying. I wondered if there was something a little sinister about him after all. What part of the Midwest?
San Francisco.
I see.
My family all died and I came into a good deal of money. After that, I lived like a young Raj in all the capitals of Europe and South America, collecting jewels, hunting big game, and painting a little, trying to forget something very sad that happened to me long ago. But then I became a Grafton's pilot. It's very dangerous work. You must be very skilled and focused to do that. I could die at any time. I wanted to die. I tried very hard a few times. But then I met some associates who wanted me to do some flying for them in Miami. And then in the Caribbean and South America. I made quite a bit of money with them. Oh, and this. Another thing, a souvenir of Oxford days. I was taken at Trinity of Quad. The man on my left is Prince of Wales.
Photographic evidence. Well, then it was all true.
Well, I'm going to make a big request of you today, so I thought you ought to know something about my life. I happened to find out you're taking Miss Baker to tea.
Oh, do you mean you're in love with Miss Baker?
Oh, no, Lord Sport, I'm not, but Miss Baker's kindly consented to speak to you about this matter.
And then he wouldn't say another word. Over the great bridge, with the sunlight making a constant flicker upon the moving cars, the way the city rises up over the river, all built with a wish out of non-olfactory money. The city scene from the Queensboro Bridge is always the city scene for the first time, in its first wild promise of mystery and beauty in the world. Anything can happen now that we've slid over the bridge. Even Gatsby could happen. We arrived at the Roaring Noon. In a well-banned cellar, I met Gatsby's associate.
Look here, old sport. I'm afraid I made you a little angry in the car.
I don't like mysteries, and I don't understand why you won't come out frankly and tell me what you want. Why does it all have to come from Miss Baker?
Mr. Caraway, this is my friend, Mr. Wolfshot.
Hi, Balls.
Thank you.
This is a nice place, but I prefer across the street better. It's too hot over here, you know. I understand you are here for a business connection.
Oh, no, this isn't the man.
No,
This is the friend I told you we talk about the man some other time.
I beg your pardon. I must have had the wrong man.
Gatsby suddenly looked at his watch, jumped up, and hurried from the room, leaving me with Wolfshine.
He has to use the phone. Fine fellow, isn't he? Handsome to look at and a perfect gentleman. He's an Oxford man. You know, Oxford in England, right? It's one of the best colleges in the world. I met him several years ago, but I know I found a man of fine breeding after speaking to him for only 1 hour. That is the kind of man you would take home to meet your mother and sister. Gatsby's very careful about women. He would never so much as even look at your friend's wife.
Gatsby rejoined us again, and Wolfshine made moves to leave just as soon as he arrived.
You all sit here and discuss your sports and your young ladies. I won't expose myself.
He becomes very sentimental sometimes. He's quite the character around New York.
Who is he, anyway?
Wolfshine.
Yeah.
He's the man who fixed the 1985 Super Bowl.
What? How did he do that?
Just saw the opportunity. Don't worry, they can't get him, old sport. He's a smart man.
I insisted on paying the check. As the waiter brought my change, I caught sight of Tom Buchanan across the room.
Nicholas Caraway, where have you been? Daisy's furious you haven't called.
This is Mr. Gatsby, Mr. Buchanan.
Right. How have you been, anyhow? How'd you end up so far just to eat?
I was just dining with Mr. Gatsby. I turned to where he was, but he was no longer there. I stayed in town and milled about, I suppose, until it was time to meet Jordan. She told me the whole story.
Well, I remember the day. You see, Daisy and I are from Louisville. She was 18, just 2 years older than me, and by far the most popular girl around. She'd ride around town in a little white BMW Roadster. One day, I came over, and she was sitting in the Roadster with the most handsome man I'd ever seen. They were so engrossed in each other, she didn't even see me walk up. The man looked at Daisy in a way that every young girl wants to be looked at, and because it seemed so romantic to me, I remembered the moment ever since. His name was Jay Gatsby, and that was the last I'd seen of him, or so I thought. Even after I'd seen him on Long Island, I didn't realize it was the same man. Wild rumors were circulating about Daisy after that day in the roadster. How her mother found her packing her bags one winter night to go to Miami to be with some pilot. She was prevented, of course, but she wasn't on speaking terms with family for weeks. And then suddenly she was engaged. I was a bridesmaid. And the night of the wedding, I found her lying in bed, drunk, clutching a piece of paper. It scared me. She kept saying, "Tell them Daisy's changed her mind. Daisy's changed her mind!" I got her mother. We locked the door and gave her a bath, but she wouldn't let go of the letter. She took it in the tub with her and squeezed it so tight it melted into little pieces like snow. The next day, at 5 p.m., she married Tom Buchanan of Chicago with more pomp and circumstance than I'd ever seen, without so much as a shiver. They honeymooned in the South Seas, then time in Santa Barbara for Tom's first scandal with a woman. Then, after Daisy's little girl was born, to France for a year before going to Chicago, as you know. Well, about 6 weeks ago, she heard the name Gatsby for the first time. You remember? Later that night, she went into my room and she said, "What Gatsby?" It wasn't until then that I connected this Gatsby with the man in the car.
When Jordan finished telling me all this, my head was spinning. It's a strange coincidence.
No, it's not. It's not a coincidence at all.
Why not?
Gatsby bought that house so that Daisy would be across the bay. It's kind of romantic, if you're into that sort of thing. Anyways, he wants to know if you'll invite her over some afternoon and let him come over. He's afraid. He's waited so long, he thought you might be offended, you see?
The modesty of it all shook me. Something worried me.
He wants her to see his house, and your house is right next door. I think he expected to see her wander into one of his parties some night, but she never did. Daisy, she ought to have something, don't you agree?
Does she want to see Gatsby?
She's not to know. Just invite her to tea.
When I came home to West Egg that night, I was afraid for a moment that my house was on fire. Turning the corner, I saw that it was Gatsby's house, lit from tower to cellar. There wasn't any sound. As my taxi groaned away, I saw Gatsby walking over. Your place looks like Times Square.
Doesn't it?
I talked to Miss Baker. I'm going to call Daisy tomorrow and invite her over here to tea. What day would suit you?
What time suits you? I don't want to put you in any trouble.
How about the day after tomorrow? I'd want to get the grass cut.
Yes. Well, there's one thing. I thought, why look, you're old sport, you don't make very much money, do you? I thought you do. And if you're part of me, I carry a little side business, a sort of sideline, you understand? Well, I thought if you don't make very much money, that this would interest you. Wouldn't take up much of your time. You make a lot of money very quickly, but it happens to be a hush-hush thing, you see? And I assure you, you wouldn't have to do any work,
No,
Mr.
no.
Wolfsheim.
No, it's fine. I'm fine, actually. This is just a favor.
All right, then. Day after tomorrow.
The day after tomorrow. The day agreed upon was pouring rain. At 11 a.m., a man arrived to cut the grass. An army of gardeners arrived at 2 p.m. with a greenhouse worth of flowers. Tea was at 4 p.m. At 3:45 p.m. sharp, Gatsby arrived. He was pale, and there were dark signs of sleeplessness under his eyes.
Is everything all right?
The grass looks fine, if that's what you mean.
Grass? What grass? The news said they thought the rain would stop at 4. If you got everything you need in the shape of tea.
The rain cooled about 3:30 to a damp mist. Gatsby settled a bit, but his restlessness grew. Finally, he got up and informed me in no uncertain voice that he was going home. Why's that?
Nobody's coming. It's too late. I can't wait all day.
Don't be silly. It's 2 minutes to 4. I did all this. Flowers. She's here.
Here's one. Are you in love with me? Is that why I had to come alone?
It's the secret of Caraway Castle. Tell your driver to go far away and come back in an hour.
Come back in an hour, Birdie!
When we entered the room, to my surprise, it was empty. There was a knocking at the door again, and I went to open it. Gatsby, pale and soaked, was standing there. He smoothed his hair, gathered himself, and entered. For a minute, there wasn't a sound. Just the stillness of something shifting between two people.
I certainly am awfully glad to see you again.
We've met before.
We haven't met for many years.
5 years next November.
I made an excuse at the first possible moment to leave and started for the door.
Where are you going?
I'll be back.
I've got to speak to you about something. Oh God, this is a terrible mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake.
Don't. You're just embarrassed. That's all. Daisy's embarrassed too. You are acting like a little boy. Daisy's in there all alone. After half an hour, the sun shone again. I sat still outside while the world went on around me. I noted again that I was guarding other people's secrets for the second time this summer. I am, remain, both within and without. I went in, and after trying to make noise, to casually let them know I'd returned, I believe they didn't hear a sound. They just sat, staring at each other as if some question had been asked. Gatsby was glowing. Stopped raining.
Has it? So it has. I want you and Daisy to come over to my house. I'd like to show her around.
You sure you want me to come?
Absolutely, old sport.
Is that huge place there?
Do you like it?
I love it. But how do you live there all alone?
I keep it full of interesting people all the time.
We went upstairs, through period bedrooms bathed in rose and lavender silk, vivid with flowers. Dressing rooms and bathrooms with sunken tubs. He never stopped looking at Daisy. And I think he revalued everything in his house according to the measure of her response. We entered his bedroom, which was rather plain in comparison to the house, but his closet had 2 stories.
I've got a man in England who buys me all my clothes. Sends me a selection of things every season.
They're such beautiful shirts. It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before.
Gatsby held her like a small child.
If it wasn't for the mist, you'd see your house just across the bay. You always have a green light burning all night at the end of your dock.
Daisy held him tighter, but he seemed absorbed in what he just said. Perhaps in that moment, the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever. It was once again a green light on a dock, and his count of enchanted objects had diminished by 1. As I went over to say goodbye, it was clear they had forgotten me. I could see on Gatsby's face as though a faint doubt had occurred to him as to the quality of his present happiness. About this time, an ambitious young reporter from New York arrived at my door and asked if I had anything to say about my neighbor. The same notoriety that buzzed around him all summer had suddenly become a liability. The house, once booming with people every weekend, had gone silent, and everyone noticed. Everyone guessed at who he was.
James Gatz. That has my legal name. I changed it to 17 when I came across Dan Cody's yacht. Before I met Cody, I was born in Dirtport Farmers in North Dakota. It'd been me who had been loafing along the beach along the shores of Lake Superior. I saved him when his yacht was in peril, and in return, old Dad Cody took me under his wing. Once the yacht was fixed up again, he let me travel the world with him, where I learned to play the gentleman, dressed the part. Great Gatsby, you see, is who I am. James Gatz could only dream of Gatsby.
He told me all of this very much later. But I wrote that the ideas of his prehistory, his truth, even in its most honest form, seemed like that of fairy tales. And once he had the fairy tale of Daisy, everything else came to a halt. For days and weeks, I didn't see him or hear his voice over the phone. Until I got a call that I was invited to one of his parties, and I was to accompany both Tom and Daisy.
I'm delighted to see you. Glad you dropped in. I believe you met before Mr. Buchanan about 2 weeks ago?
Yes, so we did. You were with Nikki.
I know your wife.
That's so. You live here?
Next door. Tom was evidently perturbed by Gatsby's presence, and even more with Daisy, who refused to share the same feelings towards Gatsby.
These things excite me so.
Look around. You must see the faces of many people you've heard about.
Oh, we don't get out very often. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that we don't know a single person here.
Well, perhaps you know that lady there.
That's Ali Sheedy. I love her movies. The one about detention is so great. She's lovely. Great party, man! And Duran here tonight?
Not tonight.
Not tonight. Who's this?
This is Jordan Baker, golf star. This is Nick. He's a neighbor and a friend. This is the lovely Miss Daisy Buchanan. And this is Tom, the polo player.
Oh, no, not me.
Oh, Tom, you should be proud of your achievements.
I'd rather not be the polo player.
Daisy, may I have this dance?
I'd be delighted. In case you want to take any addresses down while I'm gone.
They danced. I remember being surprised by his grace. Then they sauntered off, just towards my porch and gently out of sight. The rest of the evening carried on as it did with all the other parties. People danced. They drank too much and their emotions ran high. When people are drunk, something happens in that blur of intoxication that makes the irrational seem perfectly rational. There's a moment where the crowd swells from a joyous carefree to a sloppy danger. We were careening towards sloppy danger when Daisy returned. Gatsby had been called by his butler to some call in some faraway city. We stood on the sidelines as the crowd made its slow descent into drunken chaos. Tears and accusations, jokes and spilled drinks. Ali Sheedy began to vomit in the bushes. Daisy liked Ali, but the rest offended her. She was appalled by Westek.
Who is this Gatsby fellow, anyhow? Some sort of smuggler. A lot of these new age rich people are in on some sort of smuggling.
Not Gatsby. He owns a bunch of gas stations.
Well, he certainly must have strained himself for this. I'd like to know what he does, and I think I'll make a point of finding out.
Daisy waited for Gatsby to return, but he wasn't able to. He said goodnight to both of them. I stayed late into the night. Gatsby asked for me to wait for him until he was free. I did.
She didn't like it, old sport.
Of course she did.
No, old sport, oh no. I feel so far away from her. It's hard to make her understand. She used to be able to understand.
I wouldn't ask too much of her. You can't repeat the past.
Can't repeat the past? Why, of course you can.
He spoke of the past often, like he wanted to recover something. And Daisy was the key to that recovery. He has relentless hope.
One night, 5 years ago, we first kissed. And it was at that moment I felt forever wed to her. I knew my mind would never grow up again like the mind of God. So she has to tell him. Tell him that she never loved him. It's as simple as that.
It was when curiosity about Gatsby was at its highest that the lights in the house failed to go on one Saturday night. It was rumored that he fired every one of his servants and replaced all but one. The next day, I called Gatsby on the phone.
I wanted somebody who wouldn't gossip. Daisy visits often in the afternoons. I'm calling at Daisy's request. We want you to come over to lunch at her house tomorrow. Miss Baker will be there. We need you, old sport. Daisy needs you there.
The next day was broiling. Almost the last, certainly the warmest day of summer. Though the room had a faint wind, everything felt weighed down.
We can't move.
Make us a cold drink, Tom.
You know I love you. You forget there's a lady present.
You kissed Nick too.
What a vulgar girl.
I don't care.
They're bringing drinks. You know, I read somewhere that the surface of the sun is getting hotter and hotter every year. Wait, no, opposite of that. It's getting colder and colder every year.
I'm right across from you. Just across the bay.
So you are. There's sport for you. Love to be out on that water.
Gatsby and Daisy's eyes met, and they stared together at each other, alone in space.
It's so hot. What will we do with ourselves this afternoon and the day after that and the next 30 years?
Oh, don't be morbid. Life starts over when it gets crisp in the fall.
But it's also hot and confused. Who wants to go to town? Who wants to go? You look so cool. You always look so cool. You resemble the ad of a man selling cigarettes. I always think.
She had told him that she loved him. And Tom saw. He was astounded.
All right, let's go to town. I'm perfectly willing to go. Come on, let's get a start on it. Come on, what's the matter? Let's go.
Are we just gonna go? Like this? Oh, let's have some fun. It's too hot to fuss. Come on, Jordan. We're going to town.
I don't see the point in going to town. When we get these notions in their heads. I'll go fetch us some whiskey.
I can't say anything in this household, sport. Her voice is full of money.
That was it. I'd never understood before. It was full of money. That was the inexhaustible charm that rose and fell in it. High in a white palace, the king's daughter, the golden girl.
Shall we go in my car?
You take my coupe. Let me take your car to town.
Not much gas in it.
Plenty of gas. If I run out, I can always buy more at a gas station. You could buy anything at a gas station, can't you? Come on, Daisy. I'll take you in Gatsby's circus wagon.
You take Nick and Jordan. We'll follow you in coupe.
Did you see that? You must think I'm pretty dumb, don't you, Baldwin? Well, maybe I am dumb. Maybe I am. But I have a second sight sometimes. And it tells me what to do. Made a small investigation into this fellow. In my second sight, of course.
Did you mean a medium? Did you see a psychic?
No, I'm referring to Gatsby. I made a small investigation into his past.
And you found him to be an Oxford man?
Oxford? Oxford men don't wear pink suits. Maybe Oxford, New Mexico.
We were all irritable now and fading. As Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's eyes came into view, we were melting into the haze of the Valley of Ashes.
Let's have some gas. Hurry up. We didn't stop for the view.
I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sick. I'm sick all day.
What's the matter?
I'm all run down, and I need money pretty bad. I need that car of yours soon. I've been here too long. Me and my wife, we want to go west.
Your wife does.
Well, she's going whether she wants to or not. You see, I wised up to something the last few days. I'm going to get her away from here.
The car is yours. I'll get sent over tomorrow afternoon.
As we drove away, Tom was feeling the hot whips of panic. His wife and his mistress, so secure 1 hour before, were slipping from his control. We arrived to the Roaring Newt. The room was large and stifling. It was already 4 p.m. Opening the windows admitted only a muggy gust from Central Park.
Open another window.
There aren't any more.
Then call down for an axe.
The thing to do is to forget about the heat. You make it worse by crabbing about it.
Why not let her alone, old sport?
That's a great expression of yours, isn't it? Old sport. Where'd you go pick up that little number?
Tom, if you're gonna make personal remarks, I won't sit here another minute.
Old sport. Here. I understand you were in Oxford, bud?
Not exactly.
Oh, yes, I understand you went to Oxford.
Yes, I was there.
When?
It was 1981. I was there for 5 months for business connections that were in Oxford. That's why I can't really call myself an Oxford man. I knew I'd be there for a while, so to fit in, an associate sponsored a semester for me so I could make those connections easy.
I wanted to get up and slap him on the back. I had one of those renewals of faith that I had experienced before.
Fine. Fine. Let me ask you one more question. What kind of a row are you trying to start with my wife?
He isn't causing a row. You are causing a row. Please, have some self-control.
Self-control? Self-control? I'm supposed to let Mr. Nobody from nowhere make love to my wife. Is that the latest thing? You know, I'm not very popular. I don't give big parties. I guess you gotta do all that more in order to make us a pigsty to be someone in the 80s.
I've got something to tell you, old sport.
Please don't, please. Let's all go home. Why don't we all go home?
No. I want to hear what Mr. Gatsby has to tell me. Go ahead, old sport. What's on your mind?
Your wife doesn't love you. She's never loved you. She loves me.
You're crazy. You must be crazy. Daisy loved me when we met, and she loves me now.
She only married you because I was poor and she was tired of waiting for me. She's never loved you. She's never loved anyone but me.
At this point, Jordan and I tried to leave. But Tom and Gatsby insisted that we stay and bear witness to their emotions.
You're crazy. She didn't even know that you were alive. Daisy loved me then, and she loves me now.
No!
But she does, though. And what's more is that I love her, too. Once in a while, I go off on a spree and make a fool of myself. But in my heart, I have loved her. I have loved you in all times.
You're revolting. Do you know why we left Chicago? I'm surprised you didn't treat the story of that little spree.
It's all over now. It doesn't matter. Just tell him the truth. You never loved him. And it's all wiped out forever.
How could I love him? Possibly.
That you never loved him.
She hesitated. Her eyes fell on Jordan and me with a sort of appeal, as though she realized at last what she was doing. It was done. It's too late.
I never loved him.
Not in Capilano.
No.
Not the day that I carried you down from the punch bowl to keep your shoes dry. Daisy.
Please don't. There, you want too much. There it is, Jay. I can't help but surprise. I did love him once, but I loved you too.
Loved me too?
Even that's a lie! She didn't even know that you were alive. Look here, see? There's things between Daisy and me. Things that you'll never know. Things that neither of us can ever forget.
I want to speak to Daisy alone. She's all excited now.
Now, it was Gatsby's turn to feel the hot whips of panic as Daisy slipped from his fingers.
Daisy's leaving you.
Nonsense.
I am
No, she's not. And you. Who are you, anyhow? You're a part of that bunch that hangs around with Wolfshot. That much I happen to know. Made a, call it a small investigation into your affairs. Found out what your little gas station fortune comes to.
What about it, old sport?
Don't you ever call me old sport. That gas station business is just chump change into comparison with new businesses with partners in Colombia and Miami. Heard something about a Mexican trampoline for shipping? Big time smile.
Stop! Please stop!
I looked over at Daisy, who was terrified and holding her heart. Looked over at Gatsby. He looked, and this is said in all contempt for the babbled slander of his garden, as if he could kill a man.
Please stop. I can't stand this anymore.
But you two start home in Mr. Gatsby's car. Go on. He won't annoy you anymore. I think he realizes that this little flirtation is over. Who wants drinks? Jordan? Nick?
What?
You want any of that?
No, I just remembered. Today's my birthday.
Happy birthday!
I was 30. Before me stretched the menacing road of a new decade. 30. Promise of a decade of loneliness. A thinning list of single men to know. Thinning hair. Thinning optimism. Thinning hope. So we drove towards death in the cooling twilight. We saw trouble ahead on the road as we approached the Valley of Ashes.
That's wonderful. Wilson will have business at last.
We got out to see what the commotion was. Myrtle Wilson's body, wrapped in a blanket, lay on a work table by the wall. Tom stood over her body, motionless too. I saw Wilson standing near the door, swaying back and forth, holding on to anything, anyone for support.
Myrtle. Oh my god.
What happened?
Auto hit her. Killed instantly.
She ran out on the road, and the jerk didn't even stop his car. The car was yellow. A big yellow car, brand new!
It felt as if the three of us froze at the word yellow among the bustle in the garage.
You don't have to tell me what kind of car it was.
I know what kind of car it was! Listen! I just got here a minute ago from New York and the coup out there! The blue one! See it?
Let's get out.
Damn coward. He didn't even stop his car.
The Buchanan house flooded suddenly towards us through the dark. Tom was still wiping his face as tears flowed from his eyes. He went in without saying a word.
Won't you come in, Nick?
No thanks. I was feeling sick and wanted to be alone. I hadn't gone 20 yards when I heard my name and Gatsby stepped from the bushes. What are you doing?
Just standing here, old sport. Did you see any trouble on the road?
Yes.
Was she killed?
I nodded.
Thought so. I told Daisy I thought so. Do you know what she was? She just ran on the road.
Her name was Wilson. Her husband owns the garage. How did this happen?
I tried to swing the wheel.
Daisy. Daisy was driving.
Yes, but of course I would say it was me. She was so nervous she thought driving would steady her.
It ripped her open, Jay!
Don't tell me that, old sport. I don't want to hear it. She'll be all right tomorrow. I'm going to wait here, and if he tries to bother her with any of that unpleasantness from this afternoon, if he tries any brutality...
He won't touch her. He's not thinking about her. Come home. Get some sleep.
No, thank you, old sport. I want to wait here until Daisy goes to bed. Good night.
So I walked away. I left him standing there in the moonlight, watching over nothing. I felt I had something to tell him, something to warn him about, and morning would be too late. Crossing his lawn, I saw that his front door was open. It was heavy with dejection or sleep.
Nothing happened. I waited, and about 4 a.m. she came to the window, but then she turned off the light.
You want to go away? It's pretty certain they'll trace your car.
Go away now, old sport.
Go to Atlantic City for a week or up to Montreal. But he wouldn't consider it. He couldn't leave Daisy. He was holding on to some lost hope and couldn't bear to shake free. It was this night he told me the strange story of his youth. And he told it to me because Jay Gatsby had broken up like glass against Tom's hard malice.
She was the first nice girl I'd ever known. She was so excitingly desirable. I found myself in Louisville for a night or two, dropping off a shipment, and was invited to a house party. It was her house. It was the largest, most beautiful house I'd ever been in. I was there by colossal accident. I'd been around rich people before, but not like this. Not like her. I knew she was extraordinary when I met her. When I kissed her, I felt forever wed to her. And that was it for me. I can't describe how surprised I was to find out that I loved her, old sport. She loved me too.
After he met her, they kept in touch as he did his work. And he told me the truth of that now too. He got work on a farm and learned from others how to crop dust. From there, he found his way into circles of people who needed him to fly with great skill and carry shipments for much more money than he was earning for dusting crops. He never asked what he was carrying, and no one told him. It was only when he was asked to carry the supply to elite buyers that he knew he was carrying cocaine. He never touched the stuff, but did extremely well for himself. Catch the attention of men you've read about in the news in Miami. And one very important player in Colombia. Once the Colombian connection happened, well, the business boomed. It became more dangerous to come back to Louisville. He could go anywhere where rich and famous people lived. Miami, New York, LA. To come back to the middle of the country, spark alarm.
She wanted her life shaped now. She would wait for me, but didn't wait long enough. I'd hoped to be done and have enough money to live comfortably for the both of us, but she was married before I could get there. I learned she was marrying Tom while I was in Miami. I don't think she ever loved him. You must remember, old sport, she was very excited this afternoon. He frightened her and made me look like I was some kind of cheap shark. When she got married, I was promoted to travel the world. I spent time in Oxford, you see, and a great deal in London. I never stopped loving her.
I'm gonna have to pull a train
Don't do it today. I haven't used the pool all summer. Take a swim with me, old sport.
Jay, I have to go. I need to catch the train to work. I'm not worth a decent stroke of work, but I gotta go. You know? I'll call you.
Do, old sport. Perhaps Daisy will call too.
I suppose so.
But
they're a rotten crowd. Short the whole damn bunch put together. I was always glad I said that. It was the only compliment I ever paid him. I planned to call Gatsby once I got into the city and to my office. I struggled to keep my eyes open on the train, my lids falling heavy, as my eyes relaxed into the gaze of the eyes of God. The valley of ashes lulled me to an honest rest. God sees everything. I just kept saying it like a lullaby, rocking back and forth. I don't know who I was saying it to. My soul? Myrtle? Sin? By 3 a.m. I had stopped saying it out loud. But I was still saying it. God sees everything! But I was quiet to the world. Only the occasional, oh God, would escape every time I remembered what had happened. God sees everything. By 6 a.m., I was on foot. I was on foot the whole time. I stopped by a gas station and got a sandwich that I never ate and a coffee. I was tired and walking slow. Time was strange here. I later ran into some boys who recount me as acting strange, and then no one could reaccount for where I was for about 3 hours. I was in West End by 2:30. I had asked someone where Gatsby's house was. By that time, I knew his name. God sees everything. Everything! He was in the pool, the phone, by the pool. He must have looked up at a familiar sky through the leaves and shivered at what he found a grotesque thing the end of summer must be. A new world, material without being real, where poor ghosts breathing dreams like air drift fortuitously about. Like that ashen, fantastic figure gliding towards him through the trees. Wilson's body, a little way off the grass, and the Holocaust was complete. I remember the rest of that day and the days to come as an endless drill of police, photographers, and newspapermen in and out of Gatsby's door. Most of the reports were a nightmare, grotesque, circumstantial, eager, and untrue. found myself on Gatsby's side all alone. When I called Daisy's house after we found him, the butler informed me that they left with no return address and no indication on how I could reach them. Daisy hadn't sent a message or even a single flower. I tried to think about Gatsby then for a moment, but he was already too far away. After Gatsby's death, the East was haunted for me. The distorted beyond my eyes power of correction. Every person, place, and thing appeared grotesque, sullen, and lusterless. What once sparkled now dangled into despair. It was time to go back to the Midwest. One afternoon, I saw Tom on the street. He was walking Fifth Avenue in his alert, aggressive way.
What's the matter, Nick? Do you object to even shaking my hand?
Yes. You know what I think of you.
You're crazy, Nick. Crazy as heck.
What did you say to Wilson that afternoon?
Wilson? I told him the truth. He came to the door of my house. He was crazy enough to kill me if I didn't give Gatsby to him. Listen here, that fella had it coming. He threw dirt in your eyes, Nick, just the same as he did with Daisy. He ran over Myrtle like you'd run over a puppy. He didn't even stop his car.
There was nothing I could say, other than the unutterable fact that it was not true.
And if you think for a moment that I didn't suffer, look at me, boy. When I went to give up that apartment that I gave to Myrtle, I sat down and cried like a baby. It was awful.
I couldn't forgive him or like him. They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and people and then retreated back into their money or vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess they made. There was one more thing I wanted to do before I left. I went to Gatsby's house. It was still empty before I left. I pondered the grounds, the whispers, the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitionary, enchanted moment must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood or desired. I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way, and his dream must have seemed so close he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on. Gatsby believed in the green light, future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow, we will run faster. Stretch out our arms further. And then one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past.